Welcome to Australian Kadampa Stories, where we have the opportunity to hear about the spiritual lives of people practicing Kadampa Buddhism here in Australia. I'm your host, Colleen Isaacs from Kadampa Meditation Centre Australia and Kadampa Meditation Centre Melbourne. And today I'm so pleased to be speaking with Dani. Dani's a good friend of mine. She's been practicing for many years, so she spent quite a few years on correspondence, and we'll hear about what motivated her to come back to Australia so she could study with us here. She's one of our teachers, and she's got a really interesting background. So I think we're going to learn a lot hearing from Dani. Hi, Dani. Welcome.
Hi, Colleen. Thanks for having me today.
Nice to see you. Dani, take us back to the beginning. I mean, I know you found Dharma in Australia, but then you moved overseas. So tell us what was happening for you at the time. How did it all happen for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I first found Dharma actually when I was living in Western Australia, and it was I first really got into Dharma in 2016, but it was even before that I found Dharma. A friend of mine asked me to come along to some not day courses, GP classes in the Fremantle Centre in Western Australia, and I was like, this is really interesting, but it hadn't really gripped into it at that point. And it wasn't until after that I went overseas, and then I was working overseas, came back for a very short time and had a relationship, ended up heartbroken and in Melbourne, and just thought, I'm so miserable. I need to do something to make myself happy and to calm my mind. And I just Googled meditation in Melbourne and found our centre in North Fitzroy back in the time when Jake was teaching. And I was like, oh my goodness, these are the same people that I heard in Western Australia some years earlier. Maybe it was like 3 years earlier that I'd gone to the classes in Fremantle. But by the time I found the meditation centre again in North Fitzroy, when I started to hear Buddha Dharma at that time, I was sold. It was like after that, I haven't really turned away ever since. So that was really an important moment for me. And but even so, my work was overseas. So I work in as a humanitarian. I was working always overseas and just coming back for short times in between various jobs that I was doing, and knew that I had to go back overseas again. So I headed off, and I just was like, I can't live without this in my life. But I didn't really know what to do about that. And I kind of begged, I think it was whoever I could talk to, actually. I just begged them to let me do something. And they made correspondence available for me. So I spent the next, I think it was about 2.5 years, doing GP and FP classes by correspondence overseas, which was really challenging, but also I couldn't have done it without having that. It was such an important. I didn't want to let go of it, and it helped me get through those years, which were quite challenging years, before I could eventually come back to Australia.
And where were you living overseas?
At that time, so I was working in conflict areas, and I was working in Gaza, in Palestine, which is probably a little bit different to what it's like today, but still very, very, very tense place to be. And no one over there, it's a Muslim culture, so not many people. I couldn't really talk to many people about Buddha Dharma. There were no other Buddhists with me. I had a few friends that I spoke to about it, but ultimately I felt, like I was really on my own journey, kind of listening in to people back in Melbourne, listening, it's like almost spying on people having their FP discussions in classes, feeling like I got to know the community, but it was a bit of a one-way thing where the community didn't know who I was, but I was listening to people back at home. But that was really important for me to get through that time and to deal with the internal challenges of working in such a high energy, high conflict situation, and also just working and living away from the center. Having that still made me, it sort of was my bedrock, my rock that I could get through that time.
And was there a particular practice or particular teachings that were most helpful to you during that time?
Yeah, and I might talk about maybe two examples. I think so. Before I even got to Gaza, when I first had that aha moment, I went to a day course it was KMCA up in the Dandenong Mountains, and we had a teacher give a course on love, desire, attachment. It's a course I think a lot of us have been to. It's quite a common theme. And it was when I had that heartbreak experience, and I'd gone up to the center, up to the temple, feeling really, I couldn't imagine not being heartbroken. Like I felt so miserable and so sad. And I walked out of that class completely at peace. Like I didn't feel heartbroken about that relationship ever again. It was this like miraculous moment for me. And that was the moment that I was like, wow, like I'm not like this works. I'm not going to step away from that. And it wasn't perhaps straight away that I realized what that was, but that was really understanding that our happiness comes from cherishing others and not from cherishing ourselves. And I think until I walked into the temple that day, I'd really been focusing on my own suffering. And in that meditation, I just wished love to this person that I'd been with and wanted them to be happy and free from suffering. And it purified for me all of the painful feelings that I had about the relationship. And I was like, that is like no one could have said anything that made me feel better. Like there was no book I could have read that wasn't, Buddha Dharma that could have solved that problem for me. And so that was an extremely powerful moment. And then when I was actually in Gaza, the one thing I took with me, and I really had no idea about a daily practice. Like I was really fresh when I went back to work in Gaza, and I didn't know anything about heart jewel. I wasn't doing any kind of practice that anyone had told me what to do. All I'd done was buy how to solve our human problems. And I read the book, and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd read a paragraph, and then I'd meditate on that paragraph. And then the next day I'd read another paragraph and I would meditate. And it was the most powerful, like it's a small book, but was so powerful in developing patient acceptance. And also through that, I would also developed a lot of love. Like I was kind of doing these meditations I didn't realize on my own, but I was sort of doing the giving love meditation where I just imagined everyone being happy and imagined everyone around me free from suffering and experiencing everlasting happiness. And I just found that would make me so wonderfully happy before I'd start my day. And so that was kind of my daily practice without really having anything structured to go by at that time. It was really cool.
What's really impressive about that, Dani, a lot of us, me included, it takes a while. Well, I should say, I can't say a lot of us, definitely me. It took a while for that formal practice to develop, to want it to develop, and had to be around people and have opportunities to learn and to go to pujas for that to happen for me. Whereas you're on your own in a conflict zone, nobody around you for you to talk about this with, and yet you developed your own way of practicing this, and it protected your mind.
It's a really remarkable thing, and I think there were times when my mind was not protected, when I was not practicing, and I would think things like, I'm too busy to do that this morning. Like I'm too busy to sit with my book. And the noticeable difference on my day and my capacity to be peaceful and loving was just greatly reduced. And you could really see in that time, is even having one of Geshe-la's books and having some really basic meditations to draw from, just doing that sort of with familiarity building. Like when I did that regularly, I was so protected from so many things. And yeah, that was really powerful. It was really powerful. But it also, at the end wasn't enough. And I really wanted more. I wanted more. So I came back.
Yeah, so next chapter then. Yeah. So I mean, I met you at a summer festival in 2018 while you were still living in Gaza. So obviously you'd heard about festivals, you made it happen, you got to one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what next?
Yeah, it was I can't even remember how I managed to even hear about Summer Festival and get there. It must have been just from overhearing FP classes, I think. But I think like afterwards I was really, so I mean, I mean, it's kind of going back, way back to like sort of my late teens, early 20s when I was trying to work out what career I wanted. Um, and I became an engineer, but I didn't really know what I was going to do with engineering. And I thought I wanted to just help people. I don't know I don't know how to do that, but I want to help people. So I had this natural compassion within me, but I didn't really know sort of how to utilize it. And that's when I went, okay, people who are in war zones, surely they're the ones who need the most help. So I'll apply my efforts in conflict zones where people are really suffering to try to help reduce suffering. And so that's why I became a humanitarian. And it wasn't until finding the Buddhist path and many discussions with Gen Dawning, even when I was back in Australia, where he made me question whether that was the most effective way of helping people. And I realized over time, being in Gaza and being like, really struggling with the situation that we were in, both in a, human perspective and political perspective, but also just stresses of work and living in the context that I was, and I was burning out. I was becoming really, really angry. And although like my external appearance, people thought I must have been so great doing all of these kind, compassionate things. And absolutely, like that was my intention. But I couldn't protect my mind and I was becoming really angry. And I realized that a point came and I was like, that's it, it's not worth it. I need to really help people, I need to control my mind. I need to be happy. And I can have that power. I can impact people as much from anywhere, like any job, as long as I'm peaceful in my mind and I can, practice Buddhism. And so when I came back, I didn't realize I thought that was enough. I really needed a break. So I was coming back thinking that, I might go back overseas again to do this kind of work elsewhere. The first thing I did was come back, went to some retreats back at the temple, and very quickly decided I needed to be near a center. Like that was super important for me to be near a center. And I have the roots of living in Western Australia, but I really wanted to be in the heart of Kadampa Buddhism in Australia, which is at KMCA. So I made lots of effort to be at all the retreats I could go to, all of the events I could go to, and I just wasn't prepared to leave that. And so I stayed, joined FP in real life, in person. I met all those people. I was like, hey, I've been listening to you for years.
You thought you knew all these people.
It was really, I don't know how it felt for them, but it was certainly really surreal for me when I meet them in real life. And I'm like, oh, and you're that guy who asked those questions in class. People's curiosity around certain topics. I was familiar with those things. And then joined FP and then now, on TTP as well. And it feels like such an amazing opportunity to do all that in person. And it's like, fast tracking that progress that I started, years ago now.
And obviously, we love having you. We're so glad that you stayed. Remember when you did turn up and you weren't sure how long you were going to be around for,
Yeah.
and you're still here. And then, to the extent you're happy talking about it, I know your personal life has changed as well. You were a single girl, and now you're not. Yeah, I've got a
Yeah.
partner whose kids are very much in your life, and so a whole lot of stuff has changed for you, Dani, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah. And
almost,
how's your practice changed, if you
yeah.
don't mind?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like in so many regards, that person who was in Gaza, it's almost like, if you understand sort of the impermanence of things, like she almost doesn't exist anymore. There's not much that resembles that life that I had when I was working away. So I think, I was very happy to be back here and to build a family. I think that was something that, was important for me, having not had that for a long time, not had a sense of belonging to a family. And so that was an important personal thing for me. And, while I was that single person back in Melbourne, going to everything I could go to, all the retreats, and I focused a lot on having a very structured practice. So I was, um, I had an hour every morning when I would be meditating on my cushion. I would attend as many things as I could, but I was really kind of rigorous about my Buddhist practice because I knew how important it was. But it was in that very formal way, like on the cushion, attending as many things as I could. And then now, my life now is filled with a lot of different things. Obviously having a partner and having my two stepdaughters a very big part of my life, and the formal part does struggle a bit. Like I certainly like getting an hour in the morning, is almost impossible when we have the girls, and you've got to get them ready for school. Like I don't really get to do that formal practice anymore the way I used to when we have them, not in the mornings anyway. And so sometimes it was really, and I'm still trying to work out how I can best integrate Dharma in my life. When I've come from it, at the beginning, I felt guilty because I wasn't able to do the same amount of formal practice that I had done in the past. And I still do, of course, my formal meditations as much as I can, every opportunity that I can do. But I also have to just be a bit seeking the opportunities that exist within the day to practice Dharma. So it's really pushed me to see the opportunities that exist in daily life far more than I think, as a single person, in some regards, my life then didn't have many challenges back in Melbourne, living a pretty easy life. I had some housemates, but mostly quite peaceful and quite calm. And then you bring two young children in, and all of the pressures that come of having a family, and you have to adjust. You have to adjust. And so now my practice does look quite different. I love coming to TTP, and I love the chances to engage with Sangha and to be in a group puja. Those sorts of things are really special because they happen less often than they did do when I first got back. But now, my chances to practice are like supercharged because I feel like I'm constantly being challenged. Seeing especially seeing young children, I love having them around because I can see in them what so many adults try to hide, all the things in our mind, all of the delusions that we all have. We try to cover them up, we try to put makeup over our delusions, I think, and we can do that to some extent, but what's really going on in our mind for us? And when you see children, they haven't learnt how to do that yet. So you kind of just get delusions like right at you, and understanding the importance of practicing patience, of practicing compassion, of love, generosity, like they become these, really great insights to like how we need to all practice and how I need to practice. Yeah.
And what's interesting for you was I'm imagining, I don't know, but it was more like instant family, yeah, as opposed to, 9 or so months to get used to the idea of having a child, and then you get used to having the second child, where it was like, a bunch of fully formed kids in your life quite quickly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that could have been a shock to the system, I don't know, and certainly a challenge to adjust your practice to.
Yeah. I really, it was totally shocking. Like I just didn't know what I was getting myself into. I would say, in like not necessarily a bad way. It was very. I just I fell in love with a man who happens to have two kids, and I didn't realize until our lives really came together. Like he didn't get a rule book. I'm like, where's the rule book on like what you do with children? How do I not kill them accidentally? Giving them various foods. Obviously nothing that severe, but it was a big learning curve. And what was probably the biggest one was, learning to love, our capacity for love being just so vast, and, being challenged with these little beings in my life who, were not from me, that they're not my children, they're someone else's children. And that process of loving them and seeing the fear that I had as well around like losing them. I think there's a lot of things that come up with children where, you kind of want to hold them and keep them in a certain place. And it's our attachment, playing with us. And for me, like they're not my children, but I had all of those same emotions and trying to learn how to love without attachment, to really just wish them to be happy. And because at the time, like they don't love me like a mum because I'm not their mum. I'm just this woman in their life at the beginning. And it's really, like I'm developing all these feelings, and a lot of painful feelings, I think, arose for me in trying to navigate that immediate family that I didn't exactly belong in, but I kind of belonged in. And it was very challenging. I think I spent a lot of time practicing cherishing love and understanding that I had such great capacity. I would be okay because I have Buddha Dharma. I know I have all the toolkit. So whatever was coming for me with these young girls, like whatever they could throw up in terms of their anger or maybe their fears. Like I have within me the toolkit. I can be the peaceful part that helps to solve their problems, their own fears and my fears around, will they love me or will they not love me, and what happens if they don't, like all of these things that kind of pop up when they're not coming from me. That was really interesting. But through Buddhism, I was able to have the courage to walk down that path, which I think I couldn't have done without it. Like I was really struggling without it to have. I don't know what I would have done, without having Buddhism in my life to feel like I could have the capacity just to love fearlessly. That's what it is, loving fearlessly.
Yeah, it's a beautiful example of love as the great protector.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's so nice, Dani. Um, can we talk a little bit about teaching? Because I know
Hmm.
you've been teaching for the last couple of years. How did that start for you? What was your experience like?
Funny, I laugh because like there was this moment where I just thought there's no way I'm ever going to be a teacher. Like, how could I ever be a teacher? I'd never thought about it. And friend of mine, Claire, from within the centre, she was sort of talking about wanting to teach again one day, and I was like, oh, teaching? Like, no, I mean, I would, good for you, not for me. And then, like, very short, I'd never even thought about it, and then I had this one moment where I thought, oh, maybe one day, like in 10 years, maybe.
When I
Maybe
figured it
then,
all out.
yeah, like when I really get this, I'd like the opportunity to share it, right? Because it's changed my life. Like it would be nice to share it, but like, yeah, like in 10 years, maybe, you know. And then as soon as I had that thought, I was asked to teach, like almost immediately. I was like, what just like someone listening to my thoughts? I don't understand. And I think, you see kind of Geshe-la. I don't know. I have this deep faith that all these things happen, right? It's my karma, and through Geshe-la I was asked to teach, and I felt very ill prepared. I honestly I felt still very very new. Um, it was just before COVID that I was first asked to teach Simply Meditate, and I just thought like 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 I wanted to say no, right? But I've also thought I can't say no to this. Like I'm being asked to teach. This is an opportunity I might not get again, and I need to just be open. If someone's asking me, like I just need to be open. And I remember actually saying something like, "Have you run out of teachers? Like, is there nobody left?" And they were like,
Everyone else say no.
I'm like, are you desperate? Like, what's happened? And they were like, no, no, we actually think you'd be a good teacher. And I was like, really? Like, have you got the right number? Like, I was really, really, really surprised by the request to teach. And I had the first few moments of teaching, and then unfortunately we went into lockdowns, and so I didn't teach again for quite a while. And so I was really glad I took that opportunity because I didn't know when it was going to come again. And I, for a while, I didn't think I would ever teach again. And I was really just like, well, I had those, it was probably 3 or 4 there were not many classes that I taught. And then it wasn't again until, I don't know, post-COVID, like when things started to open back up again and I started to do some Tuesday lunchtimes at Federation Square, and would just hope that there was only the 3 people who were sat in front of me that were actually listening. And then I'd find out that people were actually, online, like lots of people were listening to my teachings. But it was such a great opportunity for me to really practice, because to be able to teach something, I find like I have to have really tried to put it into practice in my daily life. Otherwise, it's very uncomfortable trying to teach something that's just academic. Like, you really have to have some experience. So it always forces me to go deeper and deeper in my practice, and to rely heavily on my spiritual guide. Like, I can't teach really without Geshe-la at my heart. And I think because I'm quite a nervous person in public speaking situations, that when I teach well, like when people might tell me it was a good meditation, it was a good teaching, sorry, Geshe-la was definitely teaching. Like, it was coming from a place that would not have been me. It was someone else. And so that's an amazing experience. And I wish everyone could have that experience. And I hope everyone has that experience of having Geshe-la at their heart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so powerful, isn't it? And I've always respected and admired how, like, your faith in Geshe-la, how strong it is, but also how it grew, like when you were on your own. Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, again, away from a center, away from a sangha, away from pujas, just you on your own, developing and growing, nurturing your faith. It's really inspiring.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of it like that. Yeah. And certainly I think, I think it helped that I have come from I grew up Catholic. And so I have a family that naturally kind of has faith, maybe not in Buddhism, but has faith. And I had that background, and I feel in many ways very grateful that I had that baseline of understanding that I could have faith in something. And so when I found Geshe-la, and certainly do have, strong faith in Geshe-la, and that's been a really important part of my life. Absolutely. Yeah.
Was there ever a challenge of, how you grew up and your beliefs from how you grew up versus your faith now? Was there anything that you had to reconcile, or no? Did it feel it's smooth and okay?
No, no, nothing to reconcile. It was more, I think, this was clearly my path. Like, I think I'm a very curious, spiritually curious person, and so I went quite religiously to church, from the beginning of when I can remember until I would have been quite old for, I think, a lot of my contemporaries. Probably was, what are they, like 18, 19, 20. Like, I was, certainly beyond high school. I was beyond high school, and I was still going to church on Sundays, because I was craving some answers or something, but I couldn't see a path. And so and so then I stopped going as really when I was in my 20s into my 30s. And then when I found these teachings, and it was more than just stories of someone's life, it was practical teachings that this is the problem, these are the steps you take, and then this is the solution. Like, this is how you solve your problems. So practical, and functions every time if you do it properly. I just was like, that's what I've been missing. Like, I've had that desire to be a better person, to develop, but never the path so clearly laid out. And so when I found this, it was like, that's it. Like, people often ask me about, because they know that I teach, they ask me about all sorts of other Buddhist faiths, and I don't know anything about any other Buddhist tradition, really. I know little bits from, traveling in Thailand, or, but really when I found this, I stopped looking. Like, this was it. I'm like, these are my problems. I'm told how to solve them. The rest is up to me. Like, I really just need to put it into practice. So yeah, I didn't have to, I think from my parents' perspective, maybe they had to reconcile some things when I, said that I was going to be a Buddhist, and not go to church anymore. But from my side, it was a really easy and clear decision. Yeah.
And good job, not messing around. you found your path and you stepped on it and
Yeah,
yeah, and haven't gotten off. I love that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So what would you say to someone who is interested, like they're considering coming to a class, but they're not quite sure, what would you say to somebody who's curious, but a little on the fence?
Yeah, I mean, I think come along. I just, there's no point getting caught up. I think, getting caught up in religion, like the title, is not necessary. And that's the beautiful thing I think about Buddhism. There's a really nice, easy entry point. Everyone has positive feelings about meditation, I think, or the desire to be able to meditate. So there is a lot of natural curiosity for people. I think come along. It's so practical. You don't have to be a Buddhist. You don't have to believe in Buddha. At the beginning, you just hear the teachings and they are medicine. They are medicine for our mind. And I don't think it's what time wasted ever. Like, come along and see how it goes. And, people have specific karma that'll have them coming back, at a certain point, or they will not. But the teachings are for everyone. Everyone's welcome. Yeah.
You don't have to wear a green jumper, wear whatever you want. Just
So
please
beautiful.
being not watch. Danny and I are basically wearing the same sweater, not on purpose.
Color coordination.
Yeah. Danny, I've loved speaking to you. Thank you so much. I've known you for quite a number of years, but we don't always have the opportunity to unpack these things, do you? So I've loved hearing about your background and that respect that I had for your faith earlier. It's like, exploded now that I've heard even more about the early years of your practice. So thank you so much for sharing. And so glad that you're here in Melbourne.
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. It's been great to talk to you too. Thanks for the
All right.
opportunity.
Bye bye.
See you. Bye.